If you've ever felt the kind of silence that isn't just an absence of sound, but an oppressive weight that presses in on you, the kind that whispers in your ear and steals the air from your lungs, you understand the terror of Blackwater Creek. And tonight, I'll tell you about the town that was swallowed by it and the family that tried to live there. The town of Havenwood was always a quiet place, tucked away in a valley with one main street and a population that never seemed to change. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your business, and every morning started with the same sleepy rhythm of a place untouched by time. But just outside of town, the Blackwater Creek flowed. It was wide and deep, and on the clearest of days, you could see the shadows of twisted, submerged trees under its glassy surface. The water was always still, always black, and always silent. Locals called it the Silent Creek, and for as long as anyone could remember, they stayed away. Nobody fished in it, nobody swam in it, and nobody built a house on its banks. But then came the developer. His name was Marcus Thorne, a man with a smile as slick as his perfectly coiffed hair. He saw the tranquil creek as a selling point, a beautiful backdrop for a new housing development he called Creekview Estates. He dismissed the locals' warnings as rural superstition. "It's just a creek," he'd scoff. "Water doesn't have a memory." The old-timers just shook their heads. "Water doesn't have a memory, but what's in the water," they whispered, "that's a different story." By the summer of 2004, the first family had moved in. The Millers, Mark, a writer in his late 30s, his wife Sarah, a painter, and their 12-year-old daughter, Chloe. They were looking for a fresh start, a quiet place away from the city's noise. The deal on a brand new home with a creek view was too good to pass up. Their home was a modern 2-story, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. It was perfect. At least, it seemed that way at first. The air was fresh and clean. The mornings were full of birdsong. The house was a blank canvas for their new life. For the first few days, the Millers reveled in the quiet. Mark set up his study, a room with a sprawling desk and a view of the forest. Sarah unpacked her canvases and paints, excited by the light pouring into her new studio. Chloe spent hours on the back porch, sketching the strange, beautiful trees that seemed to lean over the water, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. She told her mother that the trees were sad, but Sarah just laughed and said they were full of character. On the third night, a strange sound began to fill the air. It was a low hum, a deep resonance that vibrated through the floorboards and rattled the glasses in the kitchen. It wasn't loud, but it was relentless. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Mark checked the appliances, the furnace, the circuit breaker. Nothing. The hum persisted, a deep and steady pulse, a sound that seemed to live inside the very walls of the house. He eventually dismissed it as a minor electrical issue, something he would call an electrician about in the morning. But in the morning, the hum was still there, and with it, a new kind of silence. The crickets that had sung the night before were gone. The birds no longer sang in the morning. The frogs that used to call out at night were gone. The entire area around their house became unnaturally still, as if the hum had silenced the world. When Mark tried to start a conversation with a neighbor a few houses down, the man's face paled. He just muttered something about the hum and quickly went back inside. That same morning, Chloe came to her parents with a drawing. It was a picture of the creek, but in the center, a perfectly round white stone floated on the black surface. "I saw it last night," she said, her voice small. "It came from the creek." It was glowing. Mark and Sarah went out to look. The creek was as still and black as ever. No stone, no glow. Mark squeezed Chloe's hand and told her it was just a dream. But when he looked back at the house, a window on the second floor was open, even though he knew he had shut it the night before. Over the next week, the hum grew louder. It was no longer a vibration. It was a noise. It felt like a pressure in their ears, a dull ache that never went away. It got so bad that Mark couldn't focus on writing. Sarah couldn't paint. The silence outside was complete, but the hum inside was deafening. It was a constant, maddening presence, and with it, things started to disappear. First, it was small things. Mark's favorite coffee mug, a set of car keys, a silver bracelet Sarah wore every day. They'd searched the house, only to find the item later in a place they'd already checked. Mark's car keys would be on the counter, but now they were wet and cold. The coffee mug would be in the cupboard, but filled with black silt. A new box of crayons Chloe had bought was found scattered on her bed, a few of them broken and stained black. The family's sense of peace began to dissolve. One night, Mark was working late on his manuscript. He had given up on finding a quiet spot and was now just trying to push through the noise. As he typed, a single word appeared on his screen. The cursor blinked. The word was drown. He deleted it, but seconds later it reappeared. Again and again, the word drown typed itself onto his page. He deleted it, but it kept coming back. He finally unplugged the computer in a fit of frustration, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to tell himself he was just tired, that his mind was playing tricks on him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing his mind. He looked out the window and saw it, the black surface of the creek, shining in the moonlight. It looked like a liquid mirror, but it was Chloe who saw it first. She came running in from the backyard, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Mom! Dad! The creek! It's moving!" They rushed to the back window. The water, which was always so still, was swirling in the center. A slow, steady vortex was forming, pulling a strange, glowing white light just beneath the surface. It pulsed with a sickening rhythm, and with each pulse, the humming grew into a thunderous roar. It was no longer a hum. It was a guttural, terrifying sound that seemed to be trying to say something. The house shook. That night, the house was filled with a new sound. It was the sound of something dragging itself up the creek bank. A wet, slurping noise, like a massive slug moving through mud, followed by a series of heavy, deliberate thuds on the porch. The doors were locked, but a dark, greasy slime began to ooze from beneath the front door. It had the same odor as the stagnant creek water. The windows, even those on the second floor, were streaked with the same black residue, as if something had crawled up the side of the house. Mark grabbed a shotgun he kept for home protection. He loaded it, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the shells into the chamber. "Stay in here with me," he said to Sarah and Chloe, herding them into the master bedroom. But the hum, the roar, the dragging outside, it all stopped. The house fell into a new, terrifying silence. It was even heavier than the last one, thick and suffocating. Then came a single, clear knock on the front door. It was a firm, polite knock, a human knock. "Is someone out there?" Mark shouted. The answer came not from the front door, but from the bedroom window. A child's voice, whispering from the other side of the glass. "It's cold out here. Let me in," Chloe screamed. They turned to the window, but saw nothing but the reflection of their own terrified faces. Then, from the hallway, came the unmistakable sound of the front door latch clicking. The knob turned slowly. "Don't go in," Mark whispered, his voice cracking. He held up the shotgun, pointing it at the bedroom door. But Sarah and Chloe were no longer looking at him. They were staring at the hallway. A figure stood in the doorway. It was a man, but his features were blurred, as if seen through rippling water. His clothes dripped with the Black Creek water, and his skin was a sickly gray, translucent and stretched. He was holding something, a small, white, perfectly round stone, and it glowed with a soft, pulsing light. He lifted his hand, and the stone pulsed brighter. With its light, the hum returned, but this time it was a different sound. A chorus of 100 voices, all murmuring the same thing. "Come home. The water is waiting." The voices were layered, some high and childlike, others low and ancient. They were the voices of the lost. The figure walked into the room, leaving a trail of black, muddy footprints on the carpet. Sarah backed away, her hands pressed against her mouth. Chloe, however, didn't move. She just stared at the figure. A look of recognition crossed her face, and she took a step toward it. "Chloe, no!" Sarah shrieked, but her daughter was no longer listening. Chloe's eyes were glazed, and she extended her hand toward the man. "It's just me, Dad," she said in a hollow voice. "I'm going to go home now." Mark raised the shotgun, but his arm felt heavy, as if submerged in water. He couldn't move. The figure took Chloe's hand. She turned to her parents, her eyes now the same color as the black water of the creek. "Don't worry," she said with a chilling smile. "You'll be home soon too." Then they simply walked away, down the hall and out the front door. Mark and Sarah rushed to the windows. The figure and Chloe were walking hand in hand toward the creek. They didn't sink. They simply walked onto the surface of the black water, leaving perfect, dry footprints on its mirrored surface. As they reached the center, they stepped down, and the water closed over them without a ripple. A final, low hum radiated from the water, and then the humming stopped. The world around the house was completely, utterly silent. The air felt thin and cold. The Millers were found the next morning by a neighbor who had come to check on them. They were lying on the back porch, shivering, their clothes soaked and covered in black silt. Their eyes were vacant, and they would only whisper one phrase, over and over. The water is waiting." They were taken to a local hospital. Doctors could find no physical ailment, but their minds had broken. They were trapped in a permanent state of vacant, watery terror. The house at Creekview Estates is still there. Its windows are dark, and the property is unnaturally silent. Marcus Thorne's development was abandoned. The houses sit empty, their pristine lawns slowly being reclaimed by the wild overgrowth. But sometimes, on a quiet night, you can still hear the deep hum that fills the valley. And if you stand by the creek, you might see a faint, glowing light just beneath the surface of the black water, pulsing in time with the deep, echoing beat. And if you ever see a small, white, perfectly round stone floating on the water, don't go near it. Because the silent creek doesn't give things back. It just adds to its collection.